Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling Dem Leadership's Infirmity of Purpose, of Political Purpose, Leads to Uselessness in Political Fights. I'm trying here another way to describe the peculiarities of the political behavior of the Democratic Party leadership. Um, and it's taking language that's, sort of a general personal descriptor or uh, infirmity of purpose is something that's not, it's sort of a little bit old fashioned way to talk about uh, a lack of determination. Maybe is a more up to date way to talk about things. But um, I'm trying to locate a way to describe um, the Democratic Party leadership and also how it contrasts to some degree with the Republican Party leadership, um, and also try to explain that infirmity of purpose a little bit. I mean, the word fecklessness is used often, or not so often, but to describe the Democratic Party leadership. And I would say that's a good word, and that's very much analogous to infirmity of purpose. But I think the word infirmity of purpose really creates an opening for, if not the individuals that I'm talking about who are old mostly, like Biden, Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi, who won't necessarily change their ways, but will give people who are evaluating politicians, like voters and also people who work with politicians, some kind of a framework for understanding what would make a good politician a good, uh, and I think a firmity of purpose or non-infirmity or a sense of purpose, a sense of political purpose is critical and basic to, in what my opinion would make a good politician. And that something has to do with my values. My values, I look to politicians to both uh, lead the country, lead or a city or whatever, or neighborhood or so forth and so on, and also to um, to be protectors in some way or another of people in the political realm, uh, not to be so purposeful in a way that they do not are not able to listen to the public and listen to other people's views. So in a way, it's not a one category that can sort of solve all political problems or all problems of understanding uh, deficits in political will, in political action. Um, but I think it says something. It's a word that's come to me on and off. And so I wanted to create this video to at least describe it, also describe what leads it to the Democratic leadership's infirmity of purpose. And I've already touched on this in other videos, but I just wanted to link it to this word. So anyway, so the Democratic Party, the corporate Democratic Party leadership is, they play the good cops in the good cop, bad cop scheme in American politics. They are serving the donor class, primarily the ultra wealthy, the lobbyists, the mega corporations that um, essentially control U.S. politics and media, um, and that like to operate to some degree in the background by having this uh, good cop, bad cop routine, the narratives that it creates, the political stories that it creates, um, the compelling attractions that it creates for various people who are looking for a certain politician to identify with, so forth and so on. They identify either with the good cop or the bad cop. They don't use those words, but with these um, two parties, at least in the duopoly of American politics. So anyway, this why then would this party, that's the good cop party, have these leaders that seem so feckless, so infirm of purpose, okay, and who give up their purpose very quickly, okay, and it contrasts with, unfortunately, the purposefulness of figures like Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump, who seem very purposeful, even though at other times they are not. They are purposeless. They are in a way. Donald Trump can be considered to be almost an empty shell. His purposefulness, though, comes in part from his investment in his ego. He is very purposeful about his own interests. So, which is something that needs to be brought to light, and it should be a disqualifier to be a politician. That one is primarily concerned about using politics for one's own enrichment or just political psychological interest, and so and self-aggrandizement and power hunger and all those kind of things. So ego driven politics, but still people see the infirmity of purpose in a Trump, and they think of it as being strong, masculine, with masculine being considered to be strong, where I think that's not justified in the sense of that there are women who, and there's a femininity that's strong as well, or there are women who are strong. There are females and males who are strong. So and they don't necessarily have to conform to the stereotype gender roles of being masculine, feminine, whatever. But anyway, but in our masculinist politics, in our misogynistic politics, that's the way people often conceive of. That's why I've formulated the theory of the cult of the deadly phallus. That's part of this masculinist culture. But anyway, Donald Trump seems firm of purpose, even though he is actually an empty vessel. He's very much a servant of the donor class. But anyway, the Democratic Party leadership seems infirm of purpose and is infirm of political purpose and is useless, as I say, in political fights, or almost useless in political fights, almost entirely useless, let's say, because they are split in their role as the good cops and their loyalty to the donor class are at odds, at loggerheads, while the Republican Party are more, they act out in public and also in private as being the henchmen of the donor class, henchmen of a better sort of person. So they glorify the rich. They make the rich seem to be, now the Democratic Party leadership does that as well. They glorify them in slightly different ways and so forth and so on. But a theoretical left party, which the Democratic Party is not, would not be so glorifying of the rich. And maybe certain individuals that are intellectuals or artists would be glorified. But in general, that a left party would shy away from glorifying rich people and people for their own, just because of their economic success in the capitalist system. But the Republican Party, and this is true of almost all reactionaries throughout the last 250 years, they consider themselves to be a fighter or representing the interest of a better sort of person. They want to be considered themselves to be a better sort of person, and they're punching down at the lower orders in some form or another, or punching up in quotation marks at a mythical chimera of a hidden hand of either government slash often considered to be a Jewish conspiracy of some kind or other. I mean, this is in the recesses of the far right, which is unfortunately coming more and more into the mainstream of U.S. politics in the last 7 or 8 years. But anyway, so they consider themselves to be these loyal henchmen of the better sort of person, and so that creates at least an image of a purposefulness, that they are fighters for against the evil liberals or evil colored people, or or people of color, but the people who have different appearances, or xenophobic in some form or other. Though, there are also radical right people in other countries who have different criteria for determining who are the other, who they're fighting against. Could be religious, like in India, for instance, the Hindutva, ideology that is against Muslims, among others. And so, but anyway, in Western Europe, in the United States, it's racialized, it's biologized to some degree. Also, there are religious components as well, anti-Muslim, Islamophobic trends. But so that creates a unity of purpose, at least for public display, even though it's not really unified in some way or another. In other words, that it's play acting, but it's play acting that can be done in a way that seems passionate and is also doesn't seem to contradict as much their commitment to the donor class, to their being the protectors of the donor class, or the public face of the donor class. Meanwhile, the Democrats are faced with this choice of either attending more to the needs of the donor class, or attempting to represent their base. And it puts them, in most cases, not all cases, in most cases, in conflict with each other. Now, there are times when the donor class wants, for instance, they want to expand their market share. They want to be selling to everybody of all different persuasions, of different genders, and so they are for a liberal left identity politics, okay? And they are against, or they tend to be opposed to the social conservative us versus them politics of the right wing, when in other situations they might favor that when it comes to economic issues. So when it comes to class issues, okay, and issues of inequality, economic inequality. So they are, but most of the time, the Democratic leadership has to choose, and so they're waffling constantly, and they're making promises and undercutting their promises. So this is part of this infirmity of purpose that comes from this positioning of the good cop as trying to represent the people who have often antagonistic interests to the corporate leadership class. Not always, but often. I'm not a strict Marxist in this point of view, that I think that there's always conflict between labor and capital, and so forth and so on. There are fundamental conflicts that are there, but there's also some collaboration or coordination between them as well, that can't be overlooked. It's not simply a false consciousness, okay, by the working class. But anyway, but still, this infirmity of purpose, or this fecklessness, is more likely to be expressed especially in our current politics. And also the socialism, in the broad sense of socialism, includes social democracy, left social democracy, let's say, and more Marxian or Marxist perspectives, and even some anarchistic or anarcho-syndicalistic views, and so forth and so on. All of that puts the Democratic leadership in conflict, and so there's a long history of demonization of socialism and of in the United States, and so forth and so on, and the Democratic Party leadership is trying to run away as much as possible from that component of what would be their ordinary purpose as being the party of the people against the special interest, against the big donor or the big corporations, against the rich and the bankers and so forth and so on, that they would be representing them, and that the Democratic Party is so much to the right in the world, their center right party really, that they don't embrace that. And so, and this gets to, so this infirmity of purpose comes from a history of anti-communism, anti-socialism. It comes from this conflict between these two interest groups that the Democratic Party leadership is trying to represent, one covertly, the donor class, and overtly its electorate. Meanwhile, in reality, the covert group gets all the benefit of or 98% of the benefit, or 95% of the benefit of what Democratic Party leadership does actually in terms of policy. So now there are some progressives in Congress who are trying to bring out this social democratic / democratic socialist / for the people aspect of the Democratic Party, and trying to represent it in their politicking and in their policy making and their bills they propose. But they're been stymied a lot, so it's not. They're still a small group, probably getting a good deal bit bigger in November, maybe even doubling in size or at least growing by 50%, 60%. So anyway, so there's some better news there about at least the size of that left wing of the Democratic Party. But anyway, but I think, and this is a more general issue, I think the lack of a overarching theory, and I know some people's eyes glaze over when they hear the word theory, but or vision is maybe the better word, but theory and vision are very closely linked, in my opinion. The theory gets you to your vision. So you have a vision and you have a theory. The theory has to be based in some way on reality, and the vision, you can have all kinds of visions, but if they're not connected with a theory of change, a theory of society, so forth and so on, that is realistic, that's based on facts, that's based on reality, your vision is pie in the sky, is not useful. So in my opinion, and one of my projects personally is to reformulate left theory. Okay, I'm working on a critique of Marx. I've mentioned it before in some other videos. I think left theory is divided in certain ways that make it unproductive, that make it that put it at odds with the interests of the people, and also the interests of our society as it's developing currently, and actually it could create a broader tent for the left, and also a more to reformulate that, and that's part of this idea that I have, that we need to reformulate left theory. It could be called socialist. I don't currently call myself a socialist. I'm pro-socialist in most situations. I was a DSOC member and a DSA member when it first changed its name to DSA. I'm not currently one, but I support many of the activities of DSA and many candidates of DSA, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So I'm not opposed to them. So, but I think that there is lots of old laming theory out there, the ideas that create blinders and all kinds. This is what I'm talking about is far in advance of what the Democratic leadership doesn't care about this at all, really, and they're not nearly interested in this, and they don't say, we need a theory. But I'm talking about people who are serious about social change and about addressing the problems of society, which is not the Democratic leadership. In any case, that can lead to a purposefulness. Okay, so this is where I'm linking this to infirmity of purpose. So to have a theory of society that works to some degree, at least works politically, which is not necessarily actually working in policy and working in implementation, but to have a theory that works both in politics and works in policy implementation, so in reality, in actual changing the society itself, can create purposefulness, okay, in both activists, in voters, and also politicians. The theory of the right wing starting with, let's say, Reagan or neoliberalism, and neoliberalism is, even though it sounds centrist or whatever, is to some people as a label, is of the right, is a theory of the right wing, and it's anti government intervention, anti essentially formulated against things like the New Deal, against the Roosevelt social democracy movements in social, democratic socialist movements in Europe. So anyway, neoliberalism has created a common sense on the right wing that creates purposefulness. It's based on a fantasy about the economy, fantasy about society. It's unrealistic, but it feels real because it's been repeated so much. There are rich foundations and think tanks and so forth and so on that's created an echo chamber where people feel purposeful in promoting it. And so anyway, so for the left to feel a similar purposefulness, but for the good and also for reality, based in reality, they would need to have a theory that was politically attuned and also attuned to reality and based in reality. So anyway, so that's a way to say that's the way out of the purposelessness or the infirmity of purpose of, and I think that this infirmity of purpose also can be found in more leftward parts of not just the Democratic Party leadership. There's this whole the problem of woke identitarianism, okay, which I've mentioned in another video, which is being rediscussed now on the left. That is a signal of a defective theory, a bad theory about society, or at least an incomplete. It's an incomplete absorption of the lessons of the 1960s and 70s, the new social movements, into left theory. So it's a lack of integration. It's a melange. It's a that is not that creates all kinds of chaos in the left movement, where people then can't feel like purposefully working together, solidaristically working together. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself when I talk about that. That's a different video. So anyway, so I'm going to stop here. But anyway, if you like this discussion, please like the video, and also please participate in it by commenting on the video, and maybe we can discuss it in the comments. And also, please subscribe to Politics 2100, and I'll see you in the next video.